They say blood is thicker than water, but nobody tells you what happens when that blood turns poison in your veins. My name is Margaret Williams, and for 68 years, I believed family came first, no matter what. I raised 3 children, buried a husband, and spent decades being the glue that held everyone together. But sometimes, the people you trust most are the ones sharpening the knife behind your back. This is the story of how I discovered my own son had been stealing my life away, piece by piece, dollar by dollar, and how one mistake changed everything forever. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. The morning of March 15th started like any other Tuesday in my little house on Maple Street. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the same oak table where I'd helped my children with homework 30 years ago, sipping my coffee and watching the cardinals at my bird feeder. At 68, I had my routines, and I liked them that way. The sun was streaming through my yellow curtains, and I was feeling particularly grateful. My son David had been such a blessing these past 2 years, taking care of all my financial headaches. After my Harold passed 5 years ago, I'd struggled with the bills, the bank statements, all those numbers that seemed to swim on the page. But David, my eldest, had stepped right in. "Mom, you've worked hard your whole life," he'd said, sitting right where I was sitting now, his businessman's smile warm and reassuring. "Let me handle the boring stuff. You just focus on enjoying your retirement." And I had been enjoying it. No more worrying about whether I'd paid the electric bill on time. No more trying to balance checkbooks that never seemed to balance. David took care of everything. He'd even set up some kind of automatic system, where my Social Security and pension went straight to him, and he made sure all the bills were paid. It was such a relief. I trusted him completely. After all, this was my David, my firstborn. The one who used to bring me dandelions from the yard when he was 5, calling them sunshine flowers. The one who'd grown up to become a successful real estate developer, living in one of those fancy neighborhoods across town with his wife Jennifer and their 2 kids. That morning, I was actually planning to call him to thank him again. My neighbor Mrs. Peterson had been bragging about how her son never helped with anything, and it made me appreciate David even more. I was lucky, I thought, so very lucky. I was just reaching for the phone when I heard the mail truck rumble up to my mailbox. Force of habit made me walk to the front door. Even though I barely got any mail anymore, David had arranged for most of it to go to his office so I wouldn't be bothered with it. But there in my mailbox was a white envelope from First National Bank. It looked official, with my name printed right there on the front. Margaret H. Williams, Wot 147 Maple Street. I almost threw it away. David always said those bank statements were just duplicates of what he was handling, and they'd only confuse me. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the way the morning light hit the envelope, or maybe it was just curiosity. I hadn't seen one of my own bank statements in almost 2 years. I sat back down at my kitchen table and carefully opened the envelope with Harold's old letter opener, the brass one with the eagle handle that David had always admired. The numbers on the page didn't make sense at first. I had to get my reading glasses from the counter and look again. My checking account balance, $247.82. That couldn't be right. I knew I wasn't rich. But Harold and I had saved for retirement. We'd been careful. And my Social Security alone should have kept more than that in the account. I looked at the transactions, running my finger down the list. There were withdrawals, lots of them, all going to something called DW Enterprises. The amounts made my stomach clench. 401,853, 202,100, over and over, month after month, going back as far as the statement showed. DW Enterprises. David Williams Enterprises. My hands started shaking so badly I had to set the paper down. There had to be an explanation. David was managing my money, of course his business name would be on there. He was probably just transferring money to pay bills more efficiently. That had to be it. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. At the top of the statement, it showed my savings account balance to $0. The savings account that Harold and I had built over 35 years of marriage. The money we'd scraped together from teachers' salaries and his work at the factory. The nest egg we'd protected through recessions and emergencies and our kids' college expenses. The account that should have had over $40,000. Gone. I sat there staring at that zero until the numbers blurred through my tears. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my heart with cold hands. This was wrong. This had to be wrong. With shaking fingers, I dialed David's office number. I knew it by heart. I'd been so proud when he'd started his own business, so proud to tell people about my successful son. David Williams, Real Estate. This is Jennifer speaking. His wife's voice was bright and professional. Jennifer, honey, it's Mom. Is David available? I need to speak with him about something important. There was a pause. Oh, hi, Mom. David's in a meeting right now. Can I have him call you back? It's about my bank statement. There seems to be some kind of mistake. Mom. Jennifer's voice suddenly sounded strained. You know David handles all that. I'm sure everything's fine. Don't worry yourself about those confusing bank papers. Why don't you go for a nice walk or call one of your friends? The way she said it, like I was a child who'd found Daddy's work papers, made something twist in my stomach, but I forced myself to stay calm. Just have him call me when he can, okay? Of course, Mom. I'll give him the message. But David didn't call that day. Or the next. By Thursday I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove myself down to the bank, something I hadn't done in months. The young teller, a girl named Amy who'd always been sweet to me, looked uncomfortable when I asked to see my account history. Mrs. Williams, I'm not supposed to. Aren't you working with your son on your accounts now? I just want to understand something, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's my money, isn't it? Amy glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. Mrs. Williams, maybe you should speak with Mr. Henderson. He's the branch manager. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in a small office across from a man in his 50s who kept clearing his throat and avoiding my eyes. Mrs. Williams, your son has power of attorney over your accounts. Everything he's done has been legal and authorized. Power of attorney. The words felt foreign in my mouth. I never signed any power of attorney, Mr. Henderson's face grew more uncomfortable. According to our records, you did. About 2 years ago, your son brought in the paperwork. The room started spinning a little. Can I see it? He hesitated, then pulled out a file. There, on official-looking legal paper, was my signature, clear as day. Margaret H. Williams, giving David complete control over my finances. But I didn't remember signing it. Wouldn't I remember signing something that important? And then, like a punch to the gut, I did remember. 2 years ago, just after I'd mentioned struggling with the bills, David had come over with a pile of papers, talking fast about making things easier and protecting me from scams. I'd been overwhelmed, grateful he was helping, and I'd signed whatever he put in front of me. I'd signed away my own independence without even knowing it. Mrs. Williams, Mr. Henderson's voice seemed to come from far away. Are you all right? I wasn't all right. I was the furthest thing from all right. But I managed to nod and stand up on unsteady legs. Thank you for your time. I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. In my driveway, I sat in my old Honda for a long time, staring at the house where I'd raised my children, where I'd taught them about honesty and family, and doing the right thing. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have trusted so blindly? And the worst part, the part that made me physically sick, was that this wasn't some stranger who'd tricked me. This wasn't some scam caller or internet criminal. This was my son, my David. My sunshine flower boy. The boy I'd rocked to sleep, bandaged when he fell. Cheered for at every baseball game. The man I'd bragged about to anyone who would listen. The one I'd always defended when his siblings complained he was selfish. He'd been robbing me blind. As I finally walked up to my front door, I noticed the mail truck had come again. Another bank envelope was sticking out of my mailbox, this one addressed to David at my address. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady as I opened it. It was a credit card statement for a card I'd never seen before. But it was in my name, at my address, and the balance was 18,000. The charges were all over town, restaurants I'd never been to, stores I'd never shopped at, even cash advances. David had opened credit cards in my name. I stood there on my front porch, holding the evidence of my son's betrayal, and something inside me changed. The hurt was still there, deep and raw and terrible, but underneath it something harder was forming. Anger, pure, righteous anger. I was done being a victim. I was done being the sweet, trusting old lady who couldn't handle her own affairs. It was time to find out exactly what my son had done to me. And it was time to decide what I was going to do about it. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I'd spent the entire night sitting at my kitchen table, going through every piece of mail I could find, every scrap of paper that might tell me the truth about what David had done. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed to hear it from him. I needed to look my son in the eye and give him a chance to explain. Maybe there was still some innocent explanation. Maybe I was missing something. Deep in my heart, despite everything I'd seen, part of me still hoped this was all a terrible misunderstanding. I called his office first thing, before he could get busy with clients or meetings. David Williams, Real Estate. Jennifer, it's Mom again. I need to speak with David right now. It's urgent. This time, there was no pleasant chit-chat. Hold on, I heard muffled voices. Then David's familiar voice came on the line, but it sounded different. Cautious. Hey Mom. Jennifer said you called yesterday about some bank stuff. David, I need you to come over. We need to talk about my accounts. Silence for a moment. Then, Mom, is everything okay? You sound upset. Just come over, please. As soon as you can. I'm pretty busy today, but I can swing by around lunchtime. Don't worry about whatever's bothering you, we'll get it sorted out. The way he said it, so patronizing, like I was a child worried about nothing, made my jaw clench. But I kept my voice level. I'll see you at lunch. I spent the morning organizing all the papers I'd found, laying them out on the dining room table like evidence at a trial. Bank statements, credit card bills, even some investment account papers I'd discovered in a box Harold had left. Every single one showed the same pattern. Money flowing out, always to David's business or to accounts I'd never authorized. When David's BMW pulled into my driveway at 12:30, I watched him through the window. He sat in the car for a minute, talking on his phone, laughing at something. He looked so normal, so successful in his expensive suit. This was going to be the hardest conversation of my life. He knocked on the door, even though he'd always just walked in before. When I opened it, his smile was bright but his eyes were wary. Hey Mom, you're looking good. Have you been getting enough sleep? You sounded a little stressed on the phone. Already starting with the concern about my mental state. I stepped aside to let him in. Come sit down, David. We need to talk. He followed me to the dining room, and I watched his face change when he saw the papers spread across the table. The smile faltered for just a second, then came back even brighter. Mom, what's all this? Have you been going through financial papers? You know that stuff just confuses you. I sat down and picked up the bank statement that had started it all. David, my checking account has $247 in it. My savings account is completely empty. Can you explain that to me? He sat down across from me, his expression shifting to what I now recognized as his handling Mum. Face patient, slightly condescending, like he was dealing with someone who couldn't quite grasp adult concepts. Mom, you're looking at this all wrong. I've been managing your money to maximize your benefits. Some of it's in investments. Some of it's in my business where it's earning better returns than just sitting in savings. You're actually making money. Show me where my money is making money. It's complicated, Mom. That's why I handle it. Look, why don't I take these papers back to my office and explain everything in a simple summary you can understand? The way he reached for the papers made something snap inside me. I pulled them back. No, I want to understand now. David, there are charges on credit cards I never applied for. There are withdrawals from accounts I don't even remember opening. And according to the bank, I signed a power of attorney that I barely remember. His face was getting tighter, but he kept that patronizing tone. Mom, you did sign it. You were having trouble keeping track of things, remember? You asked me to help. I asked you to help with bills, not to empty my accounts. I haven't emptied anything. His voice rose slightly, then he caught himself and smiled again. Mom, you're getting yourself worked up over nothing. This is exactly why I took over, so you wouldn't have to stress about these complicated financial things. I picked up the credit card statement. This card has an 18,000 balance. I've never even seen this card. How do you explain that? David looked at the paper, and for a moment, his mask slipped. I saw something cold flash across his face. Then he was back to being my concerned son. Mom, I think we need to talk about something else here. Have you been feeling confused lately? Forgetting things? Because what you're describing, it sounds like you might not be remembering things clearly. The words hit me like a slap. Are you saying I'm losing my memory? I'm saying that sometimes, as we get older, we don't remember things the same way. It's normal. It's nothing to be ashamed of. But it's exactly why we set up these protections for you. Protections. My voice was getting louder despite my efforts to stay calm. David, my life savings are gone. Your money is safe, Mom. It's safer than it's ever been. But I'm worried about you. This paranoia, these accusations. Maybe we should have you talk to someone. Paranoia. I stood up, my hands shaking with anger now instead of fear. David, I have the paperwork right here. I have proof that money is missing from my accounts. He stood up too, and suddenly he seemed much taller, much more imposing. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. This is exactly the kind of confusion that made us realize you needed help managing things. Who is us? Jennifer and I. And, well, Lisa and Mark are concerned too. My other children, my heart sank. You've talked to Lisa and Mark about this? We've all been worried, Mom. Some of the things you've said lately, some of the things you've forgotten. We think you might need more help than you're getting. What things? What have I forgotten? But even as I asked, doubt crept in. Had I been forgetting things? I thought about the power of attorney document I barely remembered signing. What else might I have forgotten? David must have seen the uncertainty in my face, because his voice got gentler, more manipulative. Mom, we love you. We're trying to protect you. But if you keep getting upset about financial things you don't understand, if you keep making accusations, well, we might need to consider other options. Other options. Places where you'd have more support, more supervision. The threat was clear, even wrapped in loving concern. I felt the room spinning a little, felt that familiar doubt creeping in. Was I losing my mind? Was I seeing problems that weren't there? Then I looked down at the papers again. The numbers didn't lie. Whatever was happening to my memory, those bank statements were real. I want you to leave, I said quietly. Mom, I want you to leave. And I want you to bring me a complete accounting of every penny of my money by tomorrow. David's face finally showed his true feelings. The mask of concern was gone, replaced by cold anger. I don't think that's a good idea, Mom. I think you need to calm down and think about what you're doing here. You're about to destroy this family over some paperwork you don't understand. Get out. He stared at me for a long moment, and in that stare, I saw a stranger. Not my little boy, not even the successful businessman I'd been proud of, but someone I didn't recognize at all. Fine. But Mom, when you calm down, when you realize you've made a mistake, I hope it's not too late to fix things. I hope you haven't said things to other people that can't be taken back. He gathered up some of the papers before I could stop him, the ones that probably showed the worst of his theft, and walked toward the door. I'll call Lisa and Mark, he said from the doorway. They need to know you're having difficulties. After he left, I sat in my dining room, surrounded by the remaining evidence of my son's betrayal. and I realized something that chilled me more than the empty bank accounts. This was just the beginning. David wasn't going to confess or return my money. He was going to convince everyone I was losing my mind. And looking at the holes in my memory, the confusion I'd been feeling, I was terrified he might succeed. I was in a war I didn't even know how to fight, against someone who knew exactly how to use my love for my family against me. But I wasn't going to back down. Not anymore. I picked up the phone and dialed my daughter Lisa's number. If David was going to call her, I wanted to reach her first. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Lisa, it's Mom. I need to talk to you about something important. About David and please just call me back as soon as you can." Then I called my youngest, Mark. Same thing, voicemail. I hung up and stared at the phone, a terrible suspicion growing in my mind. When was the last time Lisa or Mark had called me? When was the last time I'd talked to my grandchildren? I'd been so grateful that David was handling everything, keeping me from being bothered by confusing family scheduling. But what if he hadn't just been managing my money? What if he'd been managing my entire life? For 3 days, I waited for my children to call back. 3 days of jumping every time the phone rang, only to find telemarketers or automated messages. Lisa and Mark, who used to call at least twice a week, had gone silent. On Saturday morning I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to Lisa's house across town, something I hadn't done in months. She lived in a modest suburban neighborhood with her husband Tom and my 2 grandchildren, Emma and Jake. When I rang the doorbell, I could hear the kids playing in the backyard, their laughter carrying through the house. It was Lisa who answered, but her face when she saw me wasn't the warm welcome I was used to. "Mom, what are you doing here? I called you 3 times. I was worried when you didn't call back." She looked uncomfortable, glancing back into the house like she was hoping Tom would come rescue her from this conversation. "Mom, maybe you should have called first. We're having a busy day." "Lisa, I'm your mother. Since when do I need an appointment to visit?" She sighed and stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind her. "Mom, David called. He's worried about you. He said you've been confused, making accusations." My heart sank. "What did he tell you?" "He said you think he's stealing from you, which is crazy. David's been nothing but helpful since Dad died. And Mom," she looked at me with the same concerned expression David had worn, and I realized where he'd learned it. "He's worried about your memory. He said you don't remember signing papers, you're getting paranoid about financial things." "Lisa, I have bank statements. I have proof that money is missing from my accounts." David explained that. "He said you're not understanding how investments work, how he's actually been helping your money grow." I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged and whose heart I'd mended through her first breakup. "You believe him over me?" "Mom, it's not about believing anyone. It's about, David handles complicated financial stuff for a living. And lately, you've seemed a little," she struggled for words, "a little off. Last time we talked, you told me the same story about Mrs. Peterson 3 times. Had I? I tried to remember our last conversation, but it was fuzzy." The doubt crept in again, that terrible uncertainty about my own mind. "I want to see Emma and Jake." "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea right now. You're upset, and they don't need to see their grandmother like this. Like this, like a crazy old woman who couldn't be trusted around children. How long has it been since I've talked to them?" Lisa looked away. "I don't know, a while." "How long is a while?" "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be." The truth hit me like a physical blow. "You've been keeping them from me. David said you called them too much. That you were repeating yourself, confusing them with stories that didn't make sense. He thought it would be better if family calls went through him first, so he could help you stay organized." My legs felt weak. I sat down hard on Lisa's front steps. "You're telling me that David has been screening my calls to my own grandchildren?" "He was trying to help, Mom. We all agreed it was for the best. We all agreed." My voice was barely a whisper. "Me, Mark, David, even Jennifer. We had a family meeting about it. We're worried about you. A family meeting. About me. Without me. I looked up at my daughter, and I saw David's manipulation written all over her face. The same concerned expression, the same patronizing tone, the same certainty that they knew what was best for poor, confused Margaret. I want to talk to Mark, Mum. Mark feels the same way. We all do. I stood up on shaky legs. I see. Mum, we love you, we're trying to help you. But if you keep fighting us on this, if you keep making these accusations about David, we might need to consider other options. There it was again. The same threat David had made, delivered in Lisa's concerned voice. Other options. Places where you'd have more support. More structure. David's been looking into some really nice assisted living facilities. I turned and walked back to my car without another word. Behind me, I heard Lisa calling. Mom, please don't be like this. We're trying to help you. I drove home in a daze, understanding finally how completely David had outmaneuvered me. It wasn't just my money he'd stolen, it was my entire family. He'd painted me as a confused old woman who couldn't be trusted, and my other children had bought it completely. By the time I got home, I was so upset I could barely see straight. I sat in my car in the driveway, crying harder than I had since Harold's funeral. The isolation was crushing, more painful than the missing money, more devastating than David's betrayal. I'd lost my family. That's when I remembered the community center. Harold and I used to volunteer there sometimes, and after he died, I'd gone to a few of their grief support meetings. I hadn't been in months. But suddenly I needed to be around people who weren't part of David's web of manipulation. The community center was bustling with Saturday activities when I walked in. Kids were running around, families were laughing, and for a moment, I felt like I could breathe again. Mrs. Williams. Is that you? I turned to see a young Asian woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. I'm Sarah Chen, she said, extending her hand. One met at the grief support group a few months ago. I'm a social worker here. Oh yes. Sarah. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard day. Her expression immediately became more concerned. Would you like to sit down? Maybe talk about it. Something about her genuine warmth, so different from the calculating concern I'd been getting from my own family, made me nod. We sat in a quiet corner of the community center's main room, and somehow, I found myself telling her everything. About David, about the missing money, about the family meeting I wasn't invited to, about feeling like I was losing my mind. Sarah listened without interrupting, without that patronizing expression I'd grown to hate. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Williams, how much do you know about elder abuse? Elder abuse. Financial elder abuse is one of the most common crimes against seniors, and it's usually committed by family members. What you're describing, it's textbook. I felt a rush of relief so intense it made me dizzy. You believe me. I believe you. And more than that, I think I can help you. But what about my memory problems? What if David's right about that? Sarah leaned forward. Mrs. Williams, do you remember what you had for breakfast this morning? Oatmeal with blueberries. Do you remember how to get to the grocery store? Of course. Can you tell me your grandchildren's names and ages? Emma's 10 and Jake's 7. Your memory seems fine to me. But even if you were having some memory issues, that doesn't give anyone the right to steal from you or isolate you from your family. For the first time in days, I felt hope. What can I do? First, we document everything. Every missing dollar, every suspicious transaction. Then we figure out exactly what legal authority David actually has, and how we can limit it. And Mrs. Williams, she looked me straight in the eye. You're not crazy, you're not confused, and you're not alone. I started crying again, but this time they were tears of relief. There's something else, Sarah continued gently. The way your family is treating you. The way they're dismissing your concerns and threatening you with assisted living. That's emotional abuse. It's designed to make you doubt yourself and give up fighting. But they think they're helping me. Maybe some of them do. But Mrs. Williams, Someone convinced them you were incompetent without any medical evidence, without any real proof. Someone organized a family meeting about your future without including you. That's not help, that's control. I thought about David's cold stare when I'd confronted him, about the way he'd taken some of the evidence with him, about how quickly he'd moved to turn my other children against me. He planned this, I whispered. It sounds like it. Financial abusers often isolate their victims from support systems. They convince everyone that the victim is confused or difficult. So when the victim tries to get help, no one believes them. How do I prove it? We start with the evidence you have, and we get more. Bank records, account statements, documentation of every transaction. We also document the emotional abuse, the threats about assisted living, the isolation from your grandchildren. I felt something I hadn't felt in days: determination. What's the first step? First, we change your address with the bank so your statements come here instead of your house. We can't let David intercept any more of your mail. Then we request complete records from all your financial institutions. Will that work? Mrs. Williams, you're not powerless here. You're the account holder. You have rights even if David has power of attorney. And if he's been forging your signature or coercing you, that power of attorney might not even be legal. As we talked, I felt my strength returning. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had an ally, someone who believed me, someone who understood what was really happening. But as we made our plans, I couldn't shake the feeling that David wasn't going to make this easy. He'd already turned my children against me and threatened me with assisted living. What would he do when he realized I was fighting back? I was about to find out, because just as Sarah and I were finishing our conversation, my phone rang. It was Lisa. Mom, where are you? David's been trying to reach you. He says it's urgent. I'm fine, Lisa. I'm at the community center. The community center. Mom, David thinks you might be telling people things, making accusations. He's worried you're going to embarrass the family. I looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Lisa, I'm getting help from a professional who understands financial elder abuse. Silence. Then, Mom, you're scaring us. David thinks we need to have another family meeting tonight. Tell David I won't be attending any family meetings about me that don't include me from the planning stage. Mom, please. You're making this so much harder than it has to be. I hung up and looked at Sarah. They're going to escalate this, aren't they? Probably. But Mrs. Williams, you're not the same woman who walked in here an hour ago. You're not alone anymore, and you know the truth about what's happening to you. She was right. I wasn't the same woman. The scared, confused victim who'd been questioning her own sanity was gone. I was angry now. I was determined. And I was done being David's victim. But I had a feeling the real battle was just beginning. Sunday evening came too quickly. At 6 o'clock sharp, 3 cars pulled into my driveway: David's BMW, Lisa's minivan, and Mark's pickup truck. I watched from my living room window as my family gathered on my front lawn, talking in hushed tones before approaching my door. I'd spent the entire day with Sarah at the community center, going through every piece of financial documentation we could find. What we'd discovered was worse than I'd imagined. David hadn't just been draining my accounts, he'd been systematically stealing from me for over 2 years, to the tune of nearly $60,000. But I also had something I hadn't had before: knowledge, documentation, and a plan. The knock on my door was firm but polite. When I opened it, all 3 of my children stood there looking like they were attending a funeral. Lisa held a casserole dish, as if this were a social visit. Mark wouldn't meet my eyes, and David had that same fake concerned expression he'd been wearing all week. "Hi, Mom," Lisa said softly. "Wu brought dinner. We thought we could all sit down and talk." I stepped aside to let them in, noting how David immediately scanned the living room, probably looking for the financial papers he'd tried to take. "Where should we eat?" Lisa asked, heading toward the kitchen. "Actually, let's sit in the dining room," I said. "I have some things I want to show you all." I saw David's jaw tighten. but he followed the others to the dining room where I'd carefully laid out copies of everything Sarah and I had organized. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment account records, all showing the same pattern of systematic theft. "Mom," David said before anyone could sit down, "we need to talk about what happened yesterday. Lisa said you went to some community center, told strangers private family business. I spoke with a social worker about financial elder abuse." Mark finally looked up. "Elder abuse? Mom, that's a pretty serious accusation." My youngest son was 38, a mechanic with calloused hands and an honest face. He'd always been the peacemaker in the family, the one who avoided conflict. But he looked genuinely confused, not manipulative like David. "Sit down, Mark. All of you. I want to show you something." They reluctantly took seats around the table. Lisa kept glancing nervously at David, as if waiting for permission to speak. Mark looked at the papers with growing concern, and David looked angry. "Mom, before you start making accusations, we need to discuss your condition, my condition, your memory problems, your confusion about financial matters. The social worker you talked to, did you tell her you've been having cognitive issues?" I felt that familiar doubt creep in, but this time I was ready for it. "David, let me ask you something. What cognitive issues specifically?" He exchanged glances with Lisa. "You've been repeating yourself, forgetting conversations, making the same phone calls multiple times. When? Give me specific examples." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally Lisa spoke up. "Mom, you told me about Mrs. Peterson's garden 3 times in one phone call. When was that phone call, Lisa?" A few weeks ago." "Can you tell me what else we talked about in that conversation?" She looked flustered. "I don't remember exactly, but you remember perfectly that I repeated one story 3 times." Mark was studying the papers in front of him. "Mom, what are all these bank statements?" "Those show where my money has been going for the past 2 years." David reached across the table and started gathering up the papers. "These are private financial documents that Mom doesn't understand. She's been getting herself worked up over normal account management." I put my hand firmly on the papers, stopping him. "Don't touch those." The authority in my voice surprised everyone, including me. "Mark, look at this statement." I pushed a bank record toward him. "This shows a 3 at 200 withdrawal to DW Enterprises. Can you explain what that's for?" Mark looked at David questioningly. David's face was getting redder. "That's investment capital that's earning Mom money. She doesn't understand how business investments work." "Show me," I said quietly. "Show me the returns on this investment. Show me where my money is earning interest. Mom, it's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it. If my money is earning returns somewhere, there should be statements, documentation, something that shows where it is and how much it's worth." David stood up abruptly. "I don't have to justify sound financial management to someone who can't remember signing a power of attorney." "I remember signing it," I said. "I remember you bringing over a stack of papers and telling me it would make things easier. I remember you rushing me through the signing, telling me not to worry about the details because you'd handle everything." "See." David turned to his siblings. "She's rewriting history now, making me out to be some kind of manipulator when I've been nothing but helpful." Lisa looked troubled. "Mom, David's been managing your finances for free. He's been trying to help you." "For free?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lisa, according to these statements, David has taken over $60,000 from my accounts." Mark's head snapped up. "60,000? That's not missing money," David said quickly. "That's invested money. Money that's working for Mom instead of sitting in low-interest savings accounts." "Where?" Mark demanded. "Where is it invested?" David's mouth opened and closed like a fish. It's complicated, Mark. There are several different investment vehicles. I'm not stupid, David. I may just be a mechanic, but I understand money. Where are the investment statements? Where are the quarterly reports?" The room fell silent. David looked trapped, and I could see his mind racing for another explanation. "The thing is," I said quietly, It's not just the money. I reached for another folder Sarah had helped me prepare. David, can you explain why I haven't talked to my grandchildren in 3 months? Mom, we discussed this. You were calling them too frequently, repeating yourself, confusing them. I was calling them once a week, to talk to my grandchildren. How is that too frequently? Lisa shifted uncomfortably. Mom, you were asking Emma the same questions over and over. What questions? About school. About her friends. You mean I was asking my granddaughter about her life, like grandmothers do? Mark was looking back and forth between his siblings. What? You guys have been screening Mom's calls to the kids. We were helping her stay organized, David said defensively. By cutting her off from her grandchildren, by managing her communications so she didn't overwhelm them with repetitive conversations. I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. David, I want you to call Emma right now. Put her on speakerphone. What? Call your niece. Let me talk to her. If I'm so confused and repetitive, it should be obvious, right? David's face went pale. I don't think that's a good idea. The kids don't need to be dragged into adult problems. The kids don't know there are adult problems unless you've told them there are. Call Emma. Mom, please, call her, or I will. Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I'll call her. Lisa, what's Emma's number? David lunged for the phone. Don't. You don't understand what's happening here. What's happening here is that our brother has been stealing from our mother and lying to us about it. Mark's voice was getting louder, angrier. Lisa, give me Emma's number. Lisa looked terrified, glancing between her brothers. I mean, you don't know your own daughter's phone number. Of course I do, but David told you not to let Mom call her directly. The truth was written all over Lisa's face. She started crying. He said it was for the best. He said Mom was getting confused and it was upsetting the kids. Mark stood up, towering over David. You son of a bitch. You've been isolating our mother from her own grandchildren. I've been protecting everyone. David shouted back. Do you want the kids to see their grandmother like this? Paranoid, making accusations, getting confused about money. I'm not confused about this. I held up a credit card statement. This shows charges at restaurants I've never been to, cash advances I never made, purchases at stores I don't even know exist. All on a credit card I never applied for, in my name. How do you explain that? David looked at the statement, and for a moment, his mask completely slipped. I saw pure calculation in his eyes, the look of someone deciding whether to keep lying or try a different approach. He chose a different approach. Fine. You want the truth. The business has been struggling. I needed some temporary capital, and I used Mom's accounts as collateral. It's all going to be paid back with interest. The room exploded. You used Mom as collateral. Mark was furious. Without her knowledge. Lisa was staring at David in horror. I have power of attorney. It's legal. Legal doesn't make it right. Mark was on his feet now. Mom, how much did he take? I looked at David, this stranger wearing my son's face. According to the documentation, about 60,000 from the savings and checking accounts, plus another 18,000 in credit card debt. Lisa gasped. David, that's everything. That's Mom and Dad's entire life savings. It's temporary. The business is turning around. I'll pay it all back. When? I asked quietly. When will you pay it back? Silence. David, when will you pay back my life savings? More silence. Mark sat back down heavily. Oh, God, Mom, we're so sorry. We believed him. We actually believed you were getting confused. The threats about assisted living. I continued. The family meetings about my future that didn't include me. The isolation from my grandchildren. What was the plan there, David? Keep me confused and isolated until I was too weak to fight back. David's face crumpled. For a moment. He looked like the little boy who used to bring me dandelions. But then his expression hardened again. You have no idea what kind of pressure I've been under. The business, the mortgage, Jennifer's spending. I was going to pay it all back. I just needed time. Time you were going to buy by having me declared incompetent. He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The answer was written all over his face. Lisa was sobbing now. David, how could you do this to her? How could you do this to us? We trusted you. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, Mark said quietly. You chose to steal from our mother. You chose to manipulate us. You chose to isolate her from her grandchildren. David looked around the table at his family, and I could see him realizing that his web of lies was completely unraveling. Fine. Fine. You want to destroy this family over money. Go ahead. But don't come crying to me when Mom ends up in some state facility, because none of us can afford to take care of her. He headed for the door, then turned back. And Mom, good luck proving any of this. I have power of attorney. Everything I did was legal. You'll spend whatever money you have left on lawyers, and you'll still end up with nothing. After he left, the three of us sat in stunned silence. Finally Lisa spoke. Mom, we had no idea. We're so sorry. We're gonna fix this, Mark added. Whatever it takes. I looked at my remaining children, the ones who'd been deceived along with me, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. There's something else, I said. I'm not doing this alone. I have help. I told them about Sarah, about the evidence we'd gathered, about the legal options we were exploring. David's wrong about one thing, I finished. Just because something is technically legal doesn't make it right. And there are ways to challenge a power of attorney that was obtained through deception. Mark leaned forward. What do you need from us? I need you to help me document everything. Every conversation, every threat, every lie. And I need you to help me reconnect with Emma and Jake. Don't, Lisa said immediately. Mom, they've been asking about you. We told them you were busy. But they've been asking. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. David thought he'd isolated me, thought he'd turned my family against me, thought he'd made me powerless, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated his mother. And now, instead of one confused old woman, he was facing a united family who knew the truth. The real battle was just beginning. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again, not the confused old woman David had tried to convince everyone I was, but Margaret Williams, retired teacher, mother and grandmother. A woman who had raised 3 children, survived the loss of her husband, and wasn't about to let anyone steal her dignity along with her money. Mark had stayed the night, sleeping on my couch because he was worried David might come back. Lisa had taken the kids to school, then come straight over with coffee and determination written all over her face. What's our first step, Mom? She asked, setting a steaming cup in front of me. We'll meet with Sarah at the community center. She's been researching legal options all weekend. Mark looked up from the financial papers he'd been studying. Mom, I've been going through these statements, and it's worse than we thought. David didn't just take the big chunks. He's been skimming smaller amounts for months. 500 here, 300 there. He was hoping you wouldn't notice. My phone rang, interrupting us. The caller ID showed David's office number. Don't answer it, Mark said immediately, but I picked it up anyway. Hello, David. Mom. His voice was different today, harder, more business-like. I've been thinking about our conversation last night, and I realize we need to discuss this situation more rationally. What situation is that? Your financial confusion, your accusations, the way you've turned Mark and Lisa against me. I put the phone on speaker so my other children could hear. David, I didn't turn anyone against you. The truth did that. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. Last night you were claiming I stole money, but as I explained, everything was invested for your benefit. Then show me the investments. I don't think you're in the right frame of mind to understand complex financial instruments. Lisa grabbed the phone. David, it's me. Show us the investments. Show us where Mom's money is. Lisa, I'm disappointed in you. I thought you'd be more supportive of family. I am being supportive of family. I'm supporting Mom. You're being manipulated. Mom's found someone at that community center who's filling her head with paranoid ideas about elder abuse. Mark took the phone next. David, just answer the question. Where's Mom's money? Silence. Then, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. He hung up. The three of us looked at each other in stunned silence. Then Mark started laughing, not happy laughter, but the bitter kind that comes when someone shows you exactly who they really are. Did he just threaten to sue us for asking where Mom's money is? That's exactly what he did, I said. And it tells us everything we need to know. An hour later, we were sitting in Sarah's office at the community center. She'd brought in her supervisor, an older woman named Patricia who specialized in elder abuse cases. Mrs. Williams, Patricia said after reviewing our documentation, what David did to you is called financial exploitation, and it's a felony in this state. The fact that he had power of attorney doesn't protect him if he used it to benefit himself rather than you. But he keeps saying everything was legal because of the power of attorney. Power of attorney is a tool for helping someone manage their affairs, not a license to steal from them. If we can prove he acted in his own interests, rather than yours, which these bank statements clearly show, then he committed a crime. Sarah spread out more papers. I've been researching David's business, DW Enterprises. He's had financial problems for over a year. 3 months ago, he took out a second mortgage on his house. 2 months ago, his business credit cards were maxed out. Your money wasn't invested, Mrs. Williams. It was used to keep his failing business afloat. I felt sick, so it's gone. Not necessarily. If we act quickly, we might be able to recover some of it. The first step is revoking his power of attorney. Can I do that? Absolutely. You're the one who granted it. And you have the right to revoke it at any time, as long as you're mentally competent, which you clearly are. Patricia handed me a legal document. This revokes David's power of attorney immediately. We'll need to get it notarized and send copies to all your financial institutions. As I signed my name, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For 2 years, David had controlled every aspect of my financial life. Now, I was taking that control back. Mark asked. We file a complaint with the police, Patricia said. Financial elder abuse is a crime, and we have clear evidence. Will they arrest him? Lisa asked. She looked torn between hope and dread. That depends on the district attorney, but at minimum, it will create an official record and might help with civil recovery. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Grandma, it's Emma. Mom gave me your number back. Can you call me? I started crying right there in the office. What is it? Sarah asked gently. I showed her the text. I haven't talked to my granddaughter in 3 months. Call her, Lisa said. Right now. With shaking fingers, I dialed the number. Emma picked up on the first ring. Grandma, her voice so young and bright and happy made me cry harder. Hi, sweetheart. I've missed you so much. I missed you too. Mom said Uncle David told her you were too busy to talk to us. But I knew that wasn't true, because you're never too busy for me and Jake. Out of the mouths of babes. A 10-year-old had seen through David's lies when the adults in her life had been fooled. You're right, honey. I'm never too busy for you. And I'm going to make sure I can talk to you whenever you want, okay? Okay. Grandma, can you come to my soccer game on Saturday? I scored 3 goals last week. I wouldn't miss it for the world. After we hung up, I felt stronger than I had in months. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, my relationships, my place in my family. Patricia was making notes on a legal pad. Mrs. Williams, I need to ask you some difficult questions about David's behavior. Did he ever threaten you? He said if I kept making accusations, they'd have to consider other options for my care. Did he specify what those options were? Assisted living. He said I might need more supervision. Patricia and Sarah exchanged glances. What about isolation? Sarah asked. Besides screening your calls to the grandchildren, did he prevent you from seeing friends or family? I thought about it. He always had reasons why I shouldn't drive certain places. He said my night vision was getting bad, that I might get confused in traffic. He convinced me to stop going to my book club, because he said all the gossip there would upset me. What about your mail? Most of it was forwarded to his office so I wouldn't be bothered with bills and financial statements. Patricia was writing furiously. This is textbook emotional abuse alongside the financial exploitation. He systematically isolated you and made you doubt your own capabilities. Mark looked angry. He convinced us she was losing her memory, but he was the one controlling her access to information. It's a common tactic, Sarah explained. Abusers isolate their victims from support systems, then point to the victim's confusion or distress as evidence that they're incompetent. The horrible part, I said quietly, is that I started believing it. I started thinking maybe I was losing my mind. That's called gaslighting, Patricia said. Making someone question their own reality. It's psychological abuse, and it's often used alongside financial abuse. My phone rang again. This time it was Jennifer, David's wife. Mrs. Williams, I think there's been a misunderstanding. David is very upset about what happened last night. I put her on speaker. What kind of misunderstanding? Jennifer, about the money. David was trying to help you, and now you're talking about involving lawyers and police. That's going to hurt everyone, including the children. Jennifer, did you know David was using my money to pay your bills? Silence. Did you know he was taking money from my accounts to keep his business running? David handles all our finances. I don't really. You don't really what? Pay attention to where the money comes from. Mrs. Williams, you're putting me in a very difficult position. No, Jennifer. David put you in this position when he decided to steal from his mother to pay for your lifestyle. It wasn't stealing. He was managing your investments. Show me one investment statement. Show me one piece of paper that proves my money was invested anywhere other than David's failing business. More silence. Jennifer. I'm revoking David's power of attorney. I'm filing a police report. And I'm going to recover every penny he took from me, even if it means you have to sell that big house and those fancy cars. You can't do this to your own son. I'm not doing anything to him. I'm stopping him from doing things to me. After I hung up, Patricia smiled at me. Mrs. Williams, you're handling this exactly right, firmly but not cruelly. I don't want to destroy David, I said. Despite everything, he's still my son. But I won't let him destroy me. Over the next few hours, we put our plan into action. We went to the police station and filed a formal complaint. We went to the bank and removed David's access to my accounts. We contacted a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse cases. By the end of the day, David no longer had any legal control over my life, but I knew he wasn't going to give up easily. That evening, as Mark, Lisa, and I sat around my kitchen table planning our next steps, my front door burst open. David stormed in, his face red with fury. What the hell do you think you're doing? David, you don't live here anymore, I said calmly. You need to knock. I got a call from the bank. You revoked my power of attorney. You filed a police report. Yes. Do you have any idea what you've done? I could lose my business. Jennifer could lose the house. My kids could lose their college funds. I stood up to face him. David, you already lost those things when you decided to steal my money instead of handling your problems honestly. I was going to pay it back. When? You've been taking my money for 2 years. When exactly were you going to pay it back? He couldn't answer because there was no answer. He'd never intended to pay it back. He'd planned to keep taking until there was nothing left, then have me declared incompetent so I couldn't fight back. You're destroying this family, he said, his voice breaking. No, David. You destroyed this family the first time you forged my signature on a withdrawal slip. I'm just trying to put the pieces back together. Mark stood up beside me. David, you need to leave. Now, this is between me and Mom. No, Lisa said, joining us. This is between you and all of us. Because you didn't just steal from Mom, you lied to us, manipulated us, turned us against our own mother. David looked around at the three of us standing united against him, and I saw something break in his face. Fine. But when this all falls apart, when you realize what you've done, don't come crying to me. After he left, slamming the door behind him, we stood in silence for a moment, Then Lisa hugged me tightly. Mom, we're never going to let anyone hurt you like this again. We're going to get your money back. Mark added. Whatever it takes. I looked at my 2 remaining children, the ones who'd been deceived, but who'd stood by me once they learned the truth, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope for the future. David had tried to steal everything from me, my money, my independence, my family, my dignity. But he'd failed. I was still standing. I was still fighting. And I wasn't alone. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Emma's soccer stadium, cheering louder than any grandmother had a right to, when my phone buzzed with a text from our lawyer. Grand jury returned indictment. David will be arrested tomorrow. I stared at the message, feeling a complicated mix of relief and sadness. Despite everything David had done, despite all the pain he'd caused, some part of me had hoped it wouldn't come to this. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the law was clear. Grandma, did you see my goal? Emma came running over after the game, her face flushed with excitement and grass stains on her uniform. I saw it, sweetheart. That was incredible. I put my phone away and focused on what mattered, this beautiful granddaughter I'd almost lost to David's manipulation. Mom says you're coming to dinner Sunday. Jake's so excited. He's been practicing his magic tricks to show you. I wouldn't miss it. As Emma ran back to her friends, Lisa came over and sat beside me on the bleachers. How are you holding up, Mom? I'm okay. Better than okay, actually, and I was. Over the past 3 weeks as the legal process unfolded, I'd felt myself getting stronger every day. Sarah had connected me with a support group for elder abuse survivors, and I'd discovered I wasn't alone. There were dozens of other seniors who'd been victimized by family members, and hearing their stories, their courage in fighting back, had given me strength. Any word from David? Lisa asked. His lawyer called yesterday. They want to arrange a plea deal. What kind of plea deal? Restitution and probation. No jail time. Lisa was quiet for a moment. What do you think? I'd been wrestling with that question for days. David was still my son, despite everything. The thought of him in prison made my heart ache. But the thought of other elderly people being victimized by someone who faced no real consequences made me angry. I think David needs to face the full consequences of what he did, I said finally. Not just to me, but to everyone he hurt by lying to them, manipulating them. Mom, I know this is hard. It is hard. But you know what would be harder? Knowing that I let him get away with it. And that someday he might do this to someone else's mother. That evening, I was at home going through the mail, something I could do again, now that David no longer controlled it, when there was a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Jennifer standing on my porch, looking nervous and exhausted. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Mrs. Williams, can we talk? About what, Jennifer? About David. About the charges. About what's going to happen to our family. I looked at this woman who'd lived off my stolen money for 2 years, who'd helped David isolate me from my grandchildren, who'd called me confused and paranoid when I'd tried to get help. Come in, I said finally. We sat in my living room, and I waited for her to speak. David's lawyer says he could go to prison for 5 years. That's possible. Mrs. Williams, please. I'm begging you. Our children will lose their father. I'll lose my husband. We've already lost the house we're living with my parents now. I felt a flicker of sympathy, but I pushed it aside. Jennifer, where did you think the money was coming from? When David suddenly had cash to pay your mortgage, to buy you that new car, to send the kids to private school, where did you think it came from? She looked down at her hands. He said his business was doing well. His business was failing. You had to know that. I didn't want to know, she whispered. I knew something wasn't right. But I didn't want to know. At least she was being honest now. Jennifer, for 2 years, you lived in a house paid for with my money. You drove a car bought with my life savings. Your children went to private school on money stolen from their grandmother. I know. Did you ever think about what would happen to me? Did you ever wonder if I had enough money for my own needs? Tears started rolling down her cheeks. David said you had plenty. He said you were fine. I wasn't fine. I was confused and scared and isolated. I thought I was losing my mind because my own family was lying to me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back 2 years of my life. Sorry doesn't give me back the money Harold and I saved for 35 years. She cried harder. What can I do? How can I make this right? You can tell the truth. You can testify about what David told you, about how long this went on, about what you knew and when you knew it. As my husband. And I'm his mother. If I can do what's right, so can you. Jennifer left without promising anything, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. She was finally facing the reality of what David had done, and what she'd allowed to happen. The next morning, Mark called me early. Mom, David was arrested an hour ago. It's going to be in the newspaper. I'd been dreading this moment, not because I regretted pressing charges, but because it would make everything public. Everyone would know that David Williams, successful businessman and pillar of the community, was a thief who'd stolen from his own mother. Are you okay? Mark asked. I'm okay, you. I keep thinking about when we were kids. David was always the golden child, you know. The one who could do no wrong. He wasn't born bad, Mark. But somewhere along the way, he learned that charm and manipulation could get him what he wanted, and I enabled it by always making excuses for him. That's not your fault, Mom, maybe not entirely, but I see now that I protected him from consequences for so long that he stopped believing there would be any. That afternoon, Sarah called with news. Miss Williams, we've recovered some of your money. David's business account had $12,000 in it, and the court has frozen it pending restitution. What about the rest? We're still tracking it down. Some of it went to pay his mortgage and credit cards. But there might be assets we can recover through the civil suit. I felt a surge of satisfaction. It wasn't about the money anymore. I'd learned I could live comfortably on my pension and Social Security. It was about justice. There's something else, Sarah continued. 3 other families have come forward with similar complaints about David. Apparently, he convinced several elderly clients to let him manage their investments, and he's been stealing from them too. My heart sank. How many people? We're still investigating, but it looks like at least 6 families over the past 3 years. I felt sick. While I'd been proud of my successful son, he'd been running a systematic scheme to defraud elderly people. I thought about those other families, other mothers and fathers who'd trusted David and been betrayed. Mrs. Williams, are you there? I'm here. Sarah, those other families, do they need help? Support? Some of them do. Why? I'd like to meet with them, if they're willing. 2 days later, I found myself in the community center's main room, sitting in a circle with 5 other elderly people who'd been victimized by my son. There was Mrs. Chen, an 82-year-old widow who'd lost her late husband's pension. Mr. Rodriguez, a retired teacher like me, who'd lost money earmarked for his granddaughter's college fund. Mrs. Patterson, who lived down the street from me and had lost the money she'd been saving for her cancer treatments. I'm Margaret Williams, I told the group. David is my son. The silence was heavy with pain and embarrassment, theirs and mine. I want you all to know, I continued, that I had no idea what he was doing to you. If I had known, I would have stopped him. Mrs. Chen spoke first, her voice shaky but determined. Mrs. Williams, we don't blame you, you're a victim too. But I raised him. I should have seen what kind of person he was becoming. Mr. Rodriguez leaned forward. Mrs. Williams, my own nephew stole from me 5 years ago. I blamed myself too. But Sarah here, he nodded toward our social worker, helped me understand that we can't control other people's choices, even when those people are family. Over the next hour, we shared our stories. Despite the different details, the pattern was always the same. David had gained their trust, convinced them he could help with their finances, then systematically stolen from them while making them feel like they were lucky to have his help. The worst part, Mrs. Patterson said, wasn't losing the money. It was feeling so stupid, so ashamed that I'd been fooled. Everyone nodded. We'd all felt that shame, that self-blame for trusting someone who'd seemed trustworthy. But we weren't stupid, I said. David is very good at manipulation. He studied each of us, figured out what we needed to hear, and told us exactly that. We were victims of a calculated predator. By the end of the meeting, we'd formed an unlikely family, bound together by shared experience and a determination to see justice done. As I drove home, I thought about the David I'd raised, and the David who'd stolen from elderly people for years. Somewhere along the way, my little boy who'd brought me dandelions had become someone I didn't recognize. But I'd also discovered something else. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. Strong enough to face the truth about my son, strong enough to seek justice despite the pain it caused, strong enough to help other victims find their voices. That evening, Emma called me just to chat about her day at school. As I listened to her talk about her friends, and her teachers and her plans for the weekend, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. David had tried to steal my life from me, piece by piece. But in fighting back, I'd discovered who I really was. I was Margaret Williams. I was a survivor, and I was done being anyone's victim. The reckoning wasn't just about David facing consequences for his crimes. It was about me reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my place in the world. And that reckoning was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse hallway, waiting for the judge to announce David's sentence. The past half-year had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, family healing, and personal growth that I never could have imagined. David had eventually pled guilty to 6 counts of elder financial abuse, after Jennifer testified about what she knew, and when she knew it. The evidence was overwhelming, not just my case, but the pattern of theft from multiple elderly victims. His lawyer had tried to argue for leniency, painting David as a desperate businessman who'd made poor choices under financial pressure. But the prosecutor had painted a different picture, a calculating predator who'd systematically targeted vulnerable elderly people, including his own mother, and stolen over $200,000 across multiple cases. Mark stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders. Lisa was there too, with Tom and the kids. Even some members of our elder abuse support group had come to witness the conclusion of this long journey. "Whatever happens," Mark said quietly, "we're proud of you, Mom. You saved a lot of people by speaking up." It was true. After our case became public, 2 more elderly victims had come forward. David's scheme had been even more extensive than we'd initially discovered. The bailiff appeared. "The judge is ready." We filed back into the courtroom. David sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his head down. He'd lost weight during his months in jail awaiting sentencing, and he looked older. Smaller somehow. Jennifer sat in the back row with their children, who still didn't fully understand why their father was in trouble. Judge Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s who'd seen countless cases of elder abuse cross her bench. "Mr. Williams, please stand." David rose unsteadily. "I've reviewed all the materials in this case, including the victim impact statements and letters of support for the defendant. This is a particularly troubling case because it involves not just financial crimes, but the systematic abuse of trust, particularly with regard to your own mother." I felt Mark squeeze my shoulder. "The defendant has shown a pattern of targeting elderly victims, gaining their trust, then systematically stealing from them, while psychologically manipulating them to prevent them from seeking help. This behavior continued for years, suggesting calculation rather than desperation." The judge paused, looking directly at David. "However, I also note that the defendant has accepted responsibility for his actions and has expressed genuine remorse. The defendant's family members have provided testimony about his character and the circumstances that led to these crimes." I held my breath. "Mr. Williams, I sentence you to 4 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 2 years, contingent upon full restitution to all victims." 4 years. It was less than the maximum, but more than I'd feared he might get. "Additionally, upon your release, you will serve 3 years of supervised probation." during which time you are prohibited from handling financial matters for anyone other than yourself. You are also prohibited from working in any capacity that involves managing other people's money. David swayed slightly but remained standing. Restitution in the amount of $203,847 is due to the victims within 60 days of your release from prison. The court has placed liens on all your remaining assets to ensure compliance. After the sentencing, I stood in the hallway feeling strangely empty. It was over. The legal battle that had consumed months of my life was finally over. David was led away in shackles without looking at me. Jennifer approached hesitantly. Mrs. Williams, I know this doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know. I'm sorry. For everything. I looked at her, this woman who'd once lived in luxury off my stolen money, who now worked 2 jobs to support her children while living with her parents. Jennifer, take care of those kids. They're innocent in all this. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I will. And Mrs. Williams, I know David's appeals process might take time, but I want to start making payments toward restitution now. It's not much, but keep it, I said. Use it for the children. When David gets out and gets a job, then we'll talk about restitution. After she walked away, Sarah appeared at my side. How are you feeling? Relieved, sad, grateful, all at the same time. That's normal. Seeing a family member go to prison, even when it's necessary, it's complicated. Over the past 6 months, Sarah had become more than just my social worker. She'd become a friend, a guide, and eventually a partner in something neither of us had expected. Are you ready for your next chapter? She asked with a smile. 3 weeks after the sentencing, I stood in front of a room full of social workers, police officers, and victim advocates at the state conference on elder abuse. My hands shook slightly as I approached the podium, but my voice was steady when I began to speak. My name is Margaret Williams, and I'm a survivor of elder financial abuse. The person who abused me was my own son. I told my story, not just the facts of the case, but the emotional journey. The confusion, the self-doubt, the shame, and finally the anger that had given me strength to fight back. The hardest part wasn't losing the money, I said. It was losing my sense of self. My son convinced me that I was confused, unreliable, a burden. He made me doubt my own memory, my own judgment, my own worth. I could see heads nodding in the audience, professionals who'd seen this pattern countless times. But I learned something important through this experience. We survivors are not weak, we're not stupid, we're not to blame. We trusted people we should have been able to trust, and they betrayed that trust. That says something about them, not about us. After my speech, dozens of people approached me. Social workers shared stories of cases they'd handled. Police officers asked for advice on working with elderly victims. Other survivors thanked me for speaking out, but the conversation that meant the most came from a woman about my age who looked familiar. Mrs. Williams, I'm Dorothy Patterson, from the support group. Mrs. Patterson, the one who'd been saving money for cancer treatments before David stole it. Dorothy, how are you doing? Better, much better. And Mrs. Williams, I wanted you to know your example gave me the courage to press charges against my nephew, who stole from me 5 years ago. I thought it was too late, but it wasn't. I felt a surge of pride and satisfaction. This was why I'd started speaking publicly about my experience, not for revenge against David, but to help other victims find their voices. That evening I had dinner with my real family. Mark and his wife had come over, along with Lisa, Tom, and the kids. We gathered around my kitchen table, the same table where I'd discovered David's betrayal, the same table where we'd planned our fight back. Grandma, Emma said, my teacher said you're famous now because you help other people. I'm not famous, sweetheart. I'm just trying to help people who went through something similar to what I did. Like a superhero. I laughed. More like a survivor who decided to help other survivors. Jake, now 8, looked up from his chicken nuggets. Grandma, are you sad about Uncle David being in jail? The question caught me off guard. We'd tried to shield the kids from the worst details, but they knew their uncle had done something wrong. I'm sad that he made choices that hurt people, I said carefully. And I'm sad that he has to be away from his family because of those choices, but I'm not sad that he can't hurt anyone else now. Will he ever come home? Someday. And when he does, I hope he's learned to make better choices. It was true. Despite everything David had done to me, some part of me still hoped for his redemption. Not because I would ever trust him again, but because I wanted to believe people could change. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea and looked around at my house. It was the same house where I'd raised my children, the same house where David had manipulated and stolen from me. But it felt different now. It felt like mine again. My phone rang. It was Sarah. Margaret, I have some news. The State Attorney General's office wants to know if you'd be interested in serving on a task force about elder abuse prevention. What would that involve? Working with law enforcement, social services, and legislators to improve how we identify and respond to elder abuse cases. Your experience and your speaking skills. They think you could make a real difference. I thought about Mrs. Patterson finding the courage to seek justice for her own case. I thought about the other survivors in our support group who were slowly rebuilding their lives. I thought about all the elderly people out there who might be suffering in silence, convinced they were alone. Yes, I said. I'm interested. After I hung up, I walked to my bedroom and looked at the photograph on my dresser, Harold and me on our wedding day, young and hopeful and completely unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. I wish you were here to see this, I told his picture. I wish you could see what I've become. But maybe he could see it. Maybe he'd always known I was stronger than I thought. The next morning, I woke up and made my coffee, just like I had on that March morning when I'd first discovered David's betrayal. But everything was different now. I was different now. I was no longer the confused, isolated woman who'd questioned her own sanity. I was Margaret Williams, survivor, advocate, and grandmother. I had my family back, the parts of it worth having. I had my independence back. Most importantly, I had myself back. The phone rang. Emma, calling before school just to say good morning. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweetheart. Who and I did. I loved my family, I loved my new purpose, and finally, after months of doubt and pain and recovery, I loved myself again. David had tried to steal my life, piece by piece, dollar by dollar. He'd taken my money, my confidence, and nearly my sanity. But he hadn't broken me. Instead, he'd revealed just how strong I really was. And now, instead of being his victim, I was helping other people discover their own strength. It wasn't the retirement I'd planned, but it was the life I was meant to live. And it was just the beginning. To Pilu Girda 2 years later, the Margaret Williams Elder Advocacy Center opened in our community. Funded by a grant I'd helped write and donations from families who'd been touched by elder abuse. The center provides free legal aid, counseling, and support groups for elderly victims of financial abuse. David was released after serving 2 years of his sentence. He found work as a construction supervisor, honest work that didn't involve handling other people's money. He attended our family Christmas dinner, his first in 3 years. The conversation was awkward, but it was a start. Emma, now 12, told everyone who would listen that her grandmother was basically Wonder Woman, but for old people. I corrected her that I helped seniors, not just old people. But I had to admit I liked the Wonder Woman comparison. As for me, I discovered that the second half of my life could be even more meaningful than the first. I'd spent decades teaching children to read. Now I was teaching adults to recognize when they were being victimized and to find the courage to fight back. It turns out that surviving betrayal by someone you love doesn't make you weak or bitter. It makes you wise. And wisdom, shared with others who need it, can change the world. My name is Margaret Williams, and this is my story of survival, justice, and the power of refusing to be anyone's victim. And it's not over yet.